Hey guys, it's Adam here from ZFG Racing. I'm down in the shop packing up a couple orders. I'm decked out in my Pierce Manufacturing gear because yesterday we had a really fun day. We actually got to go down to Pierce Manufacturing and do our final inspection on the fire truck that we purchased 3.5-ish years ago. So if you don't know, that's kind of the average build time in the fire truck industry right now, and they are very expensive, and we're very excited to bring it on to our department. Now keep in mind, our department is a volunteer department. We do have nice equipment, but this is our first real custom truck. We've been on commercial chassis for a long time, and if you're in the fire industry, you know what that's all about. But this is our first custom Pierce, and it was a super exciting day down there. But today I actually have a really exciting video for you as well, because there's been some progress on the stock turbo record at the track. So I'm not just going to throw it all out there in the beginning of the video. I did get some good feedback. Thanks guys for the comments in the last video. It seems like people do appreciate when I get on here and ramble a little bit about car mods and kind of what it took to get us there. So the first thing we're going to talk about in this video is the current Explorer ST stock turbo record. And an important note there that, you know, when I say Explorer ST, I mean Explorer ST, not Police Interceptor, not, you know, the fastest 3-liter Explorer out there. This is an actual true to form Explorer ST, and there's a couple key differences that we'll get into later in the video that really make the Interceptor a better platform for racing. But back to Brad's Explorer. So Brad's Explorer came to us looking for a tune to push further, and it was basically full bolt-on at the time. I think he had to add a couple things that we recommended. I think we switched out the intake and some stuff like that. But anyway, you know, full bolt-on E50 tune. He put down some good draggy times. He took it to the track a couple times, ran some 1150s, stuff like that off the foot brake, and you know, he really wanted to amp it up from there. So one of the first things that we did is we switched him over to the HP Tuner's trans brake, which the HP Tuner's trans brake on this platform, like I've always said, is a complete game changer for anybody that's racing at the track and running a good wheel and tire setup. Obviously it doesn't make a huge difference on the street because you end up spinning anyway, but you know, we kind of really helped HP Tuners develop that for this platform. We were the first people to really test it, and I had all the input on all the extra things that got added to it that allow us to do basically leave on whatever boost that we want to leave on, and whatever RPM within reason. Obviously there's limitations to what the torque converter can do, but we can basically at any given time leave on whatever boost that we want to. Which is a huge game changer, like I said, for anybody that's racing at the track. So in the first video in the sequence here, this is when Brad's car was still full bolt-on with the trans brake, but it had a stock transmission, stock suspension, stock axles, all that kind of stuff was still stock, stock fuel system, and we were still on E50. So you know, right away we went out, ran an 1116, which at the time I think was the fastest a stock turbo had ever been. I'm not 100% sure on that. I don't remember exactly. But you know, we noticed we're approaching the limits of the fuel system. Obviously, you know, the big thing about the full bolt-on cars and E50 tunes is at some point in time, your turbos are capable of making enough airflow that you actually have to start dialing back the E50 or the ethanol content in your mixture. And that can be a fine dance, because if you dial back the ethanol content too much, now you've lost all your evaporative cooling and your knock resistance down track, and it can actually slow it down. Dyno wise, not a huge difference. There isn't really a huge difference between an E30 specific tune and an E50 specific tune on the dyno. But you really start to see those differences show up on the back half of the track, obviously, because you're building higher cylinder temps, higher combustion chamber temps, and there's not enough evaporative cooling in there to take it away. So you kind of start to lose your timing curve. You'll see the spark correction come in and start taking a little bit of timing out of it on the big end of the track, and that can slow it down. So we played that game, we walked that line, we ran 11:16. That's been duplicated a couple of times on a couple different cars here recently. So that's pretty solid for stock fuel system and stock turbos. Honestly, it's faster than I ever thought. Starting off in this on the Explorer platform, I never thought we'd see bottom 11s on stock turbos. It still blows my mind. That's crazy. Not as mind-blowing as what we're going to get to, but this is, at the time it was crazy. So anyway, from there, we decided to upgrade the fuel system and go to full E85. Again, you're not going to see a huge power difference on the dyno going from E50 to E85. There is some there, right? You're going to see 1, 2, 3% maybe even of a gain on the dyno, but where that really shows up, that difference between E50 and E85 on these cars in particular, is down track, on the back half of the track in the ET and the trap speed. And that has to do with evaporative cooling and being able to maintain that timing curve and stay right on the MBT the whole way out the back of the track. And that's important, right? The back half of your track is important. The front half is obviously more important, but the back half of the track is not for nothing. So anyway, we were able to amp his times up to the 11.0s. There's an 11.09 in the video sequence and an 11.04 in the video sequence. And both of those were still on the stock suspension. And at that point in time, we were really trying to leave harder. The stock transmission, was kind of not liking that anymore. And anytime we did try to leave harder, we were noticing that as the car would leave, it would actually leave so hard that it would bottom out the rear shocks. It'd hit the bump stop and then kind of push it back up and kind of unload the tires, and then it would spin the tires at 30 or 40 feet. And that would really hurt the 60-foot times and just the short track in general. So I did some searching and remembering, right, because this is common knowledge that the police Interceptor struts were different. And we always speculated that they're firmer. So we ordered up him a set of those. That's actually what I have on my car too. I switched my ST over to the Interceptor struts when I did the lowering springs. I can confirm they are definitely stiffer. The car handles way different on the Interceptor struts compared to the stock struts. I'm getting sidetracked here. Got to stay focused on what we're talking about. So we switched Brad over to the Interceptor struts, and at the same time, the car was down getting the transmission built. And the main purposes for building the transmission was so we could amp the torque up a little bit and amp the leave up. So on the next outing with the car, we got it back to the track, turned up the leave, and we ran a 1085, and that's the world's quickest and fastest stock turbo Explorer ST. And that's still that today. The only thing that has beaten it up until today was a police Interceptor, and we'll kind of get into the differences and why that's significant to people that have Explorer STs versus people that have Interceptors. So let's go ahead and we'll roll that video sequence. A lot of trans brake action in there and some good times. So when we come back, we'll talk about the differences between the Interceptor and the ST and why it matters. Okay, so let's get to the fun part. Like I said, that is the stock Turbo Explorer ST record. It's still the stock Turbo Explorer ST record, and it probably will be for a while. That is what I consider to be a reasonable expectation for an Explorer ST with a reasonable amount of weight reduction. You still have to respect that it's an Explorer ST. You know, guys, you're not going to go out there and trash your Explorer ST to chase a record. So when I say reasonable weight reduction, I'm talking you took your seats out, you took your spare tire out, you took stuff out that is easily removable and easily put back inable to the car. Stuff you can do at the track, you know, stuff like that. You didn't get after crazy door panel removal, you're not pulling your headliner down, all that good stuff. So technically, the stock turbo record was beaten by a police Interceptor. And that police Interceptor went 1084 at 127. So it didn't beat it by much. Obviously there was quite a bit more trap speed there, but a lot of that has to do with the fact that that car had a significant amount of weight reduction done to it. Like I said, there's what they advertised the weight at, and that was, you know, around 400 pounds lighter than what Brad ran his 1085 at. And, you know, we don't really know everything that was done to that car, and I don't really want to speculate on what was done to that car, what wasn't done to that car. But the fact of the matter is it went 1084 on stock turbos, and that's the benchmark that we're judging things to. And, you know, like I said, we'll say whatever about the weight reduction, the fact that it's a police Interceptor. There was a bunch of people trying to spin, well, it's a 10R80 and the 10R80 is heavier and it's going to make the car slower because, you know, the final drive ratio is different. First of all, the final drive ratio in an Interceptor is no different than an Explorer ST. It's the 356. It's the same final drive ratio. The gearing in the 10R80 is different. First and second gear are longer, but I would argue with anybody that that's actually a benefit in this situation. We all know, you know, we have Explorer STs. First gear runs out real quick. The fact that first and second gear are longer are actually helping the cause, in my opinion, and in the results you're going to see in a couple minutes here. So basically, you know, you could say it's a stock transmission. Yeah, okay, it's stock transmission, but it is a 10R80. We know 10R80s from past practices are capable of holding way more than a 10R60. You know, you can reliably hold 750 foot-pounds in a 10R80 and not, you know, have any issues at all whatsoever. So can you compare it to a built 10R60? That's probably a stretch. I would still argue that a built 10R60 is better than a stock 10R80, especially if you have it built by someone that knows what they're doing, like RSA. So I don't want to get into that argument that saying, you know, a 10R80 is equivalent to a built 10R60. I don't believe that to be the case. But there is definitely nothing that is hurting your time in that transmission. So moving on from the transmission, you know, the other key differences besides the weight is obviously the suspension is different off the rip. It's already got the better struts, and the weight distribution is a little bit different too. There's less weight in the rear. even after you strip them, there still seems to be less weight in the rear. So, the other thing about a police interceptor is you really don't feel bad gutting it, because, they're not that nice, right? They don't have all the creature comforts on the inside. So it's a lot easier for someone to stomach gutting a police interceptor. I mean, you can get them pretty cheap from auctions or wherever. They can be had for as low as $10,000, honestly, if you're looking hard enough. But you don't feel bad gutting them, and you don't feel bad doing, massive amounts of weight reduction or permanent weight reduction mods to the car. So basically, Brad didn't like the fact that his record had gotten beat, even though it wasn't in an Explorer ST. He didn't like that fact. So he took the police interceptor that he had bought for a slightly different project, which may happen someday, may not. You never know. And he said, okay, Adam, what can we do to this to take back that stock turbo record? And I said, well, I don't really think that we need to do a whole lot to it. Let's just get, let's do some major weight reduction, more than you did in your Explorer, more than just unbolting the seats and stuff like that. Let's get it gutted down to the level that this other Interceptor was gutted down to be competitive with your Explorer, and then see where we're at from there. So I gave Brad a weight reduction target of where I thought the car could get down to, and he hit that target on the head. And I do think that there's probably some more things that we can do to it to take some more weight out of it. Don't get me wrong, at this point in time, this is a full-blown race car. This is not something you're going to drive every day. So, it is a gutted interior. When I say gutted, I mean, it doesn't have door panels, doesn't have a headliner, that kind of stuff. Factory wiring harness and all that stuff is still there. So like I said, there's more opportunity for weight reduction there. The other thing that is kind of heavy on a police interceptor that's not there anymore is that kind of crossover strut bar thing in the back, the frame reinforcement that they have. That's obviously gone. That was easy pickings. That actually doesn't weigh that much either. And then, so basic mods on the car. It went over to Chris Todgke, who built a custom intercooler setup for it, a large core intercooler, custom core. He built a really nice intake for it that draws air directly from the front of the car. You'll see in the videos that it has a ram air looking thing in the grill. That's the intake that is true piped right to the turbos. Surprisingly, I thought it would help a little bit more downstream, but I think the intakes have gotten so good now, like the Houston Speed Freaks intake, the FenFab intake, Chris's intake. They've all gotten so good now that, we're not really seeing the benefits from the ram air that we were before. It also has a Nostrum Stage 3 fuel system in it with the smaller pump. If you remember, I said, earlier in the video that Brad put the Godzilla pump on his car. He took the smaller pump, which is still a big bore pump, and put it on the Interceptor with the set of Stage 3 injectors. But this car still has stock axles, stock drive shaft, stock transmission, stock engine, stock turbos, no modifications on any of that stuff. And we took it out. We made a couple draggy hits with it. We're like, ooh, this thing's fast, and we need to get it to the track ASAP. Unfortunately, that ASAP took like 3 weeks, between schedules and rain and all that good stuff. But shout out to Gary, the owner of the track, for getting us in on a rental. And I told Brad, I'm like, just go out, do a nice foot brake pass. We'll see where it's at. Well, Brad goes out and does a foot brake pass. And sends me the slip, and that was a 1046 at 128 miles an hour. So this car off the foot brake already is the world's quickest and fastest 3-liter Explorer, you know, however you want to classify it. It is the quickest and fastest stock turbo Explorer out there on the planet. Okay. And I'm like, dang, this is off of the foot brake, right? You know, trans brake's obviously going to be way better. But off the foot brake, being as light as it is, and, you know, being tuned correctly and all that good stuff, we were able to cut a 149 60 foot, which is probably, I know it is the best 60 foot I've ever seen off of the foot brake. Obviously the trap speed's way up because of the weight reduction as well. And to be honest with you, the tune is really nothing special. This is a tune that I would expect to see in anything that is an E85 based car. We didn't go crazy because we didn't have to. We knew the car was going to be fast by the draggy times. You know, it did a 1066, the first ever full pass that it made on the draggy. And we're all happy with that and excited with that. Obviously, we're super pumped that it did a 1046 at the track off the foot brake. But you know, so Brad sent me the log and I'm like, I'll look it over and we'll see, you know, about doing a trans brake hit today. And sure enough, log looks great. You know, these turbos were only making 56 pounds a minute. You know, nothing remarkable in the log whatsoever. Normal shift points, everything, you know, everything's great. So I say, hey, Brad, go out and make a trans brake hit. And we'll see how much faster it is, and then we'll see what we have to work with after that. So Brad goes out, puts it up on the two-step, leaves off the trans brake, runs the exact same time. What's going on? Okay, I expected this car to be way faster off the trans brake. What did we do wrong here? Well, I forgot that I turned the trans brake way down because I was kind of scared of it. I didn't want to break the car on the first trans brake hit ever. So it was turned down. So I look over the log. Again, nothing remarkable in the log. You know, 56 pounds a minute airflow wise. That's our peak airflow. You know, nothing crazy. That's what you expect stock turbos to do when they're full bolt on. So time to move on. Let's turn the trans brake up and let's see what it can do. I'm going to go ahead and let you guys watch the video first. The video blew my mind when I got it tonight, and obviously when I got the slip in the data log, you know, it's pretty crazy. All I did in between the trans brake pass before this and the trans brake pass that you're about to see is I added a lot to the leave, and I added a degree of timing across the board, or across the pass, I should say, not across the board, because it only affects the pass data. So yeah, let's go ahead and roll that clip, and then I'll come back and talk about it a little bit. So yeah, there you have it. A 1022 at 129.5 miles an hour on stock turbos. I can't believe it. I mean, it is a phenomenal time, and a lot of that came from Brad's hard work and dedication in getting the car, you know, down to a fighting weight, so to speak. And Chris for, you know, building the custom intake and custom intercooler and custom exhaust on the car. And, you know, it's truly their work that really allows these cars to do this kind of stuff. You know, you guys as owners, obviously I don't work on your cars, so I can't take credit for any of that stuff. I'm just the keyboard jockey. So, you know, Brad had to put the effort forward to do this, and you know, the end results speak for themselves. This car is way faster than I ever thought it was going to be. It's 60 footing harder than I thought it was going to. It's just all around has way more potential in it than I thought it was going to. So let's go over the slip real quick. Again, you know, this is a 1022 at 129 miles an hour with a 141 60 foot. And here's the interesting point to point out. This 647 at 105 is actually the quickest 8th mile time that an Explorer has ever been. So, and you can kind of see this in the data log, and you can see it in the time slip too, being stock turbo, but this thing is kind of running into a wall on the big end of the track. You can see it kind of, nose over is not the word that I would use to describe it, but if you're looking at the drive shaft curve, it's you know, turning over hard on the back half of the track. So, you know, we're really getting our really good time here, obviously, from the phenomenal 60 foot. I'm pretty sure that's the best 60 foot that an Explorer has ever had. Someone can fact check me on that, that's fine. Definitely the best 8th mile from every slip that I looked at. I looked through a bunch of Matt and Kathy's slips tonight just to make sure. It's not the fastest trap speed in the 8th mile. They still have them beat there by 3 miles an hour at least. And then, yeah, 1022 at 129 out the back. Like I said, just a phenomenal time for stock turbos. I don't think we're done here. Brad took the car home. There's a couple things that we want to do to it yet. Like I said, we both think that there's some more weight that can come out of the car. We have some ideas on what can come out yet. And we also have some other stuff to do while it's still stock turbo. I don't think that this build is going to stay stock turbo. Honestly, I don't want it to stay stock turbo. It's obviously got a lot of potential to run a 9 with a you know, bigger turbo setup on it. Like I said, we're still, you know, 56 pounds a minute. That's all these stock turbos are making right now. You know, that equates to about 22 pounds of boost. 22 pounds of boost. That's it. I mean, it is what it is in terms of the stock turbos. They only have so much to give. So long term, yeah, I would love to see big turbos put on this car. Don't know what they're going to be. Don't know when it's going to happen. I do think, like I said, we'll come back with the stock turbos at least one more time and see if we can better this. I do think I can get the leave a little harder too. So we'll see. But until then, congrats, Brad. You're now the owner of the fastest stock turbo Explorer ST and the fastest stock turbo Explorer 3-liter period that there is. And one of the fastest, actually the second fastest Explorer 3-liter on the planet. I almost said ST. It's not an ST, it's an Interceptor. I get it. But anyway, congrats, and until the next video, you guys all stay tuned out there, and I'll catch you guys later.